Glad you could join me. I'm really excited about sharing these prophetic messages from the writings of Moses. Notice I said that I'll be using the writings of Moses, which is the Jews refer to as the Tanakh. I will not be using any of the writings from the Talmud, and that being the fact that the writings of the Talmud are just basically writings from more modern day rabbis, like 1700 years or more after Moses existed. And the Talmud was kind of based on what they said was oral hand-me-downs from the days of Moses, kind of like somebody told somebody that told somebody that told somebody, and somebody told somebody, and somebody told somebody, and this went on for almost 2,000 years. God instructs us in the Bible to write the vision down and make it plain. And so, I go to the recorded, written words of Moses. God confirms His word with signs following. The Bible tells us that, and Scripture tells us that God will confirm His word with signs and wonders. And there's nothing about the Talmud that would cause me to believe that these are inspired in any way from God, that they're divine Scripture. They say that Jesus of Nazareth was hung on Passover Eve for practicing sorcery, and that He deserved His punishment. That goes on in other passages of the Talmud that says Jesus was accused of idolatry, illegitimate birth, and of being fathered by demons, and of leading Israel astray. It was very much opposing to what other scriptures say. And so anyway, that's another reason to not embrace the Talmud. There's several different sects in the Jewish religion, and several of the Jewish religions don't even embrace this Talmud. Our study is embracing the actual writings of Moses, and that all Jewish culture is not necessarily, their writings are not necessarily inspired of God. The Bible tells us in 2 Corinthians 3:6 that the letter of the law killeth, but the spirit of the law gives life. And that's really important when we're starting to study the ancient writings of Moses, to understand it's the spirit of the law that will bring life, that will bring enlightenment. There's times that the writings of Moses calls for animal sacrifice, and we're going to look at this in light of the whole counsel of God and the whole of the Scriptures. And so we're going to do a little bit of study here to see why it is that animal sacrifices are no longer necessary, even though that they are prescribed in the writings of Moses. Moses lived in a different dispensation of the Spirit of God than we do today. The death of Jesus caused a paradigm shift in the spirit realm so that we can live in a different dispensation than the Old Testament saints. And I'm going to explain that. Stay with me. First of all, Jesus became the life sacrifice that ended all life sacrifices. Romans 6:16 says, if you surrender yourself to anyone to do his will, you are the slave of him whom you obey, whether that be to sin, which leads to death, or to obedience, which leads to righteousness, or right doing and right standing with God. The book of Genesis records, first of all, God warning Adam to not partake or experience the fruit of the tree of knowledge of good and evil. Up until that time, Adam only had the knowledge of good. Adam and Eve had never experienced death. They had never experienced evil. They had never experienced destruction. They were living in a perfect world. They did not have the experience. They didn't know. If you experience the fruit of this tree, it's going to cause you to experience, or know. The word know means to experience. Like in the book of Genesis where it said Adam knew Eve and she conceived. It's talking about an intimate experience. It's talking about an exchange going on here. So it says, when you have an exchange or you partake or you receive from that tree, then you're going to have the knowledge of evil. Okay, so when God says, you shall surely die, another way of translating that would be, life is going to leave you. So if you partake of and you become entwined with and you submit to this evil influence and you open yourself up to evil, it's going to cause life to depart from you. But because Adam leaned to his reasoning realm, and that's the way the spirit of deception deals with us, he did choose to rebel against life and light. He rebelled against the laws of life and light. And if you noticed, when he first did that, life did not immediately leave Adam's body, but it was rather his spirit that life immediately went out. And, we immediately do see Adam hovering in fear. And he said, oh, I'm naked. Well, how did he even come up with the term of naked? What the word naked means is I am uncovered, is another way of you could translate that. I am uncovered. And what happened, Adam immediately saw the presence and the glory of God that covered him, departed from him. The very essence and the glory of light covered Adam and Eve. They were clothed in the glory, in the essence of everything that God is. And so you see that Adam's body didn't cease to exist, but what happened was that essence of life and light and enlightenment lifted from Adam, and he came underneath this dominance of this spirit that causes fear and torment. Since the essence of life in Adam's spirit had parted, it wasn't long till we see Adam is in torment. His son is jealous and commits murder. And we see that actually Adam opened the door to the spirit of death. Where we read in Romans 6 that, if you obey, whom you obey, that's whose servants you are, that's whose slave you become. So Adam had become, or mankind had become the slave of this spirit that wars against life and light. And that's how this presence of evil entered the earth. And so since Adam was a slave to the spirit of death, then his offspring that he produced also belonged to that kingdom. That spirit of darkness had a legal right to his descendants, and that's why the Bible tells us, and the Scriptures tells us, that all have sinned and fallen short of the glory of God. That there's none righteous, no, not one. See, we were all born slaves to this spirit of darkness. And but the good news is we are not slaves today. And we're going to go into how mankind got set free from these chains. And once again, like Adam, we can choose. Adam had the choice. He could have chosen to remain underneath the protection and the guidance and the communion with light and life, or he could rebel against the laws of life and light. And we have that choice today. And I go much more into this in the divine health, and I know if you've been watching the videos on divine health, a lot of this is review, but because this is a totally different subject, I'm reviewing this for people who've not listened to any of the divine health videos. So bear with me as I do some review, because I'm laying some foundation here that we're going to build on why we do not do animal sacrifices today when we celebrate these high holy days. Remember in the writings of Moses it said that Adam and Eve tried to put some fig leaves on, but they could say, man, this is not working. But when God did an animal sacrifice and He clothed them with the skin of that animal as a reminder that because you partnered with this spirit that hates life, that rebels against life, this spirit of death, your rebellion to the laws of life has caused a death. And actually the death was carried out against the body and soul of that animal. Animals have bodies, animals have souls, animals have emotions, animals have reasoning. So that's all the soul. That's what makes up the soul of man, and it's what makes up the soul of animals. But what made it different, He said, let us make man in our image. Again, God saying our image, which indicates that triune being. He didn't say, let me make man in my image. He said, let us make man in our image. Because God is a spirit. And so Adam was a spirit. And he was given a soul and a body. But God gave Adam dominion over the earth, over all the plants and over all the animals. And Adam's dominion was a dominion of life. Now, if you don't give someone a choice, you don't really give them a will. And that man would love God, choose to love and obey God, and not just be a robot servant. And with that choice, of course, Adam chose to rebel against life, and he opened the door for this death to come in. And since then, all of his descendants were born into this slavery to death, and that they had to have these blood sacrifices because when you rebelled against life, it opened the door to death. And so death had to be paid.